button wasn't blue yet, but now it is. And we're live. It is Friday, December 11th, 2020. And I got to tell you, it is 5:01 p.m. And, we could not have picked a better day to have David French on the show because it's almost like in anticipation of the possibility that he would be here, secessionist movements have begun filing briefs in the Supreme Court on behalf of states that don't exist. So I want to tell you my story of a state that does not exist. I was a very young freelance writer, maybe 22 or 23, living in Colorama Triangle back when a very young freelance writer could afford to live in Colorama Triangle. And I had just written one of the first stories I'd ever managed to get published in the Washington City paper. And the then editor of the Washington City paper, the great Jack Schaefer, called me up and said, "Well, Wittes," this is an exact quote, "you reported the shit out of it, but you don't know how to write. I can help you with that." And he sat me down, like literally called me into the offices of the City paper, and I basically sat next to him while he completely rewrote my story. And it was a super educational experience that I've never forgotten. And I do that to this day with young writers, one of whom is probably in the audience and who just had a piece published today on Lawfare. Met her on In Lieu of Fun, and instead of just editing her copy and sending it back to her, I got her on the phone. We got into a Google Doc together. We spent 2 hours rewriting her copy. I learned that from Jack Schaefer in this thing, and Jack said to me, "You should write more for me." And so I was home trying to figure out, okay, I had done a cool piece for Jack Schaefer at City Paper. I was kind of well on my way, but you need a second act. Mm-hmm. And so I did what any completely desperate freelance writer would do under those circumstances, having no idea of what my second act was going to be. I opened the phone book and I started flipping through like the business parts of the white pages. Was like, what's some weird shit going on in Washington that's in the phone book that I can look up and like try to find out about? And I got to the part where it was a list of all the embassies in Washington, which is kind of cool. It's like, okay, maybe I can do an article about an embassy or an ambassador or something.
I don't think anyone found stories this way, Ben. I'm just
this is new.
Well, I was young. I did. I'm telling you, I did find a story. I get to the part, the embassy of the Dominion of Melchizedek. And this was sitting there in the white pages. And I am like, I have a dim memory from my Jewish childhood of Melchizedek. I am unaware of a country named the Dominion of Melchizedek, much less one that has diplomatic relations with the United States. And of course there's no internet at this point. There's no way to... So I call up Jack Schaefer and I say, I think I have found a fake country. Now here is what Jack did not say to me. He did not say, "Has it just filed a brief in the Supreme Court?" He did not say, "Is it seceding from..." He said, "Tell me you didn't find the Dominion of Melchizedek." And
Are you kidding?
And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "Oh, it's a total scam. They run an embassy, and it's a total scam, and we did a long story about them." Great idea. I don't know where you came up with that idea, but that's a great idea. It's just that we did it 6 months ago. And so there I was, back to square one, but I had, in fact, found a story Jack liked in the phone book about a fake country.
And if you just read through your old city papers, you would have known about it.
If I had known about it, yeah. He didn't scold me for not having read the city paper. Anyway, we are not allowed.
It's already been so valuable for me because I now know how to pronounce that name.
I still don't. I have no idea what Ben just said.
I think we're talking about the same person that as a young evangelical, I heard a million sermons about high priests of the order of what we called Melchizedek.
No.
Nope, it's not
Melchizedek.
that.
I see the seal. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, Melchizedek is so tzedek is an independent words in Hebrew will tend to get more even distribution of emphasis. I don't know how they pronounced it, but anyway, I think the people involved in the dominion of Melchizedek ended up in federal prison. Not sure about that. Anyway, we're not allowed to have fun anymore. We are apparently allowed to have fake states. And we're allowed to have David Priest on to talk about it all. David,
French.
Welcome back. Sorry, David French. I'm even looking at your face. David French, welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me back. I really appreciate it.
So I would be remiss if I didn't start by giving you a chance to relate the existence or non-existence of New California and New Nevada with the thesis of your new book. Because it actually does seem like there's something, like, other than joking, there's something real thematically related there.
Yeah, so I wrote a book published in September called Divided We Fall, America's Secession Threat and How to Restore Our Nation. And basically I was making the argument that we got a lot of negative trends. As I put it in like the very first part of the paragraph of the book, is that there is no single truly important cultural, political, religious, or social force that is pulling Americans together more than it's pushing us apart. And so the book's in 3 parts. Part 1 is this is why it's bad and all the trends are making it worse. All these major trends are making it worse. The second part is sort of an imagined scenarios of how America could split apart. And the third part is what we can do to sort of heal our country and stay and reverse some of these trends. And I got to tell you, the thing that makes me nervous or the thing that's dangerous about some of these court filings isn't the New California, New Nevada stuff. Those people are super, super, super fringe cranks. What makes me nervous is that the President of the United States, 126 members of Congress, 18 state attorneys general, and a host of very big name conservative leaders and activists have signed on to or filed supporting briefs in favor of a case that, it's not going to win. Okay, this Texas Attorney General case is not going to win.
Yep.
But what they're asking for is a remedy that would break the country. Like it would break the country. There is the idea that you can toss out election results of battleground states and then have everyone just sort of say, "Oh, okay, that's fine." It's nil. So it's one of the more disturbing things. Look, my former National Review colleague, Andy McCarthy, who's a longtime defender of President Trump, wrote, I thought very compellingly, and he said, court packing is romper room compared to what they're asking for as far as like norms and norm violations. Yep. And this is a strong supporter of President Trump saying that this is what they're asking for is just unprecedented, and I believe it would be nation-breaking relief. And in my book, I say, hey, look, things are getting so toxic that we may one day have a political movement that would recklessly endanger the country. And I didn't know that when I turned in the last draft in like mid-March, that one day was like December 2020. It's just that they don't have any chance of making it happen.
So tell me something. I was trying to puzzle this through today, and not sure I know how to do it. I'd be interested in your thoughts. So we have two justices who kind of believe as a matter of principle that the court is obligated to hear original jurisdiction matters between the states. Now, that's a complicated question. I actually think there's a case for their point of view on this.
Yeah.
So I don't want to give them a hard time for the fact that they would want to hear this.
Right.
But I'm trying to think of what the right way for the Supreme Court to resolve this is. It's not going to, there's no chance of it prevailing, but how it fails seems to me to matter. One possibility is you summarily dismiss it with two justices either noting or not noting their dissent. They would hear it and presumably dismiss it on the merits. But another possibility is that you say something. And if I were the Chief Justice, I would actually want to say pretty directly to the Attorney General of Texas, don't implicate my court system in your electoral attack. You have a lot of other venues in which to attack American democracy. Keep it out of my courts. And the question is that wrong for him to try to do that? And what do you think the best way to send that message would be?
So before the 18 attorneys general and the 126 members of Congress, and can I, by the way, just sort of say, it was originally 106, and then they said, oh, well, there's 20 we kind of forgot to include, but it's now 126. Before the 18 attorneys general, the 126 members of Congress, I would have said do exactly what you did to Representative Mike Kelly's case, an appeal out of Pennsylvania, which is one sentence, Justice Alito refers to the remainder of the court and denies relief. Just boom, just complete, dismissive, sort of the closest thing the court gets to just waving something off. Once the 18 attorneys general weighed in, once the 126 members of Congress, in my mind, it began to flip because the thing I actually don't want is the court to reject hearing it at all with a dissent from two justices. I don't want that. So what I would like to see then is to say, even if it's just a 4-page, 3-page, 2-page per curiam opinion that is no, we're hearing this. There might be disagreement on the court over whether we have to hear this, but we're hearing this. No. It could be signed by the chief. It could be per curiam.
I think a per curiam is I agree with you. It needs to be that. I think that it actually has the most strength is that.
Yeah. Okay, but let me push you a little bit on that. All right, let's agree. You want it something that 9 of them can sign. Mm-hmm. You want it, so that means you have to hear it. You want to deal with it summarily. You want to deal with it fast, and you want it to be brief.
Yeah.
Now, this is what complaint or motion for leave to file a complaint is what they call in the military a target-rich environment. I mean, what grounds do you want to say is the fundamental problem here that, because I think the most offensive things about it legally are not necessarily the most offensive things about it democratically, right? The most offensive thing about it democratically is, why is Texas suing states over their sovereign prerogative to have their own elections under their own rules and give voice to the electoral sentiments of their own voters? But that is actually, I think, less obviously the right target for a justice. It's more like what you and I should be writing about it.
Right. That which is essentially sort of a standing argument that this is Texas don't mess with us.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't mess with Texas.
We'll leave you alone.
Yeah. Don't mess with Pennsylvania, Texas. And so I think that's actually, an extremely viable way of dealing with this is because I don't think the court wants to go down the rabbit hole of then adjudicating the insane statistical argument, the sort of 1 in a quadrillion chance that Trump would lose after the 3 a.m., 3 a.m. on November 4th. Insane statistical argument. The court doesn't want to go down the rabbit hole of addressing all these sort of state court claims that Texas made, that most of them have already been adjudicated in these states. So I think saying this is not Texas's business. What I mean, this is what I really want, but we can't get what we want in 2020 ever, really, truly. But what I'd really like is a 9-0 authored by Barrett that ends by sanctioning Paxton. But I can't get that. I can't.
No, that's not going to happen.
That's unreasonable to ask for. But I think a short per curiam that says no, none of your business, Texas. None of your business.
To people who don't, a per curiam decision is a decision that doesn't have a named author, and it's effectively signed by the whole panel, and there's no dissent, and it's a unanimous decision that has no named author.
Although you can have dissents from a per curiam.
You can have dissents from a per curiam. It ruins a little bit the anonymity of but in its most pure form, it's a unanimous decision. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I think that's right. I think that the obvious answer seems to me short and sweet. It's like anything with kind of crazy people, like the less kind of you engage, like the more, but, and in that sense, the best place is to come from a per curiam and have it be based on standing or some other procedural issue. Like that's clearly like the way to kind of get rid of it. Now, what that ends up being, I don't know. I would assume it ends up being standing, but standing ends up being a very kind of political doctrine itself. And so all of it is political, but I just that is something that I don't know that I want this case on the books for some type of standing issue. Does that make sense? There's a whole bunch of, I just want this to have as little as a footprint as possible, is how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. That's why I've gone back and forth between this idea. Okay, should it just be that one sentence, Pennsylvania style? It's referred to the court. The court does not take up this case. But the main reason I think that has a downside is because that might generate the dissents on this question of mandatory jurisdiction.
Right.
And I think any dissent here, this is where I think Justice Roberts has to use all of his internal court diplomacy skills to engineer one of these 9-0s, because I think the 9-0 part of it is really important. Anything that isn't 9-0 gives somebody a torch to carry. It'll be like, we were really right because Justice Thomas gets it, or Justice Alito gets it. And I know people will carry the torch no matter what. This could be 9-0. It could be written by Justice Thomas, and people would still carry this torch. But you're wanting to just strip away any remaining, even facially, anything that even smacks of reasonableness in the election challenge. And if you have a Justice Thomas dissent or an Alito dissent or something like that, and then it's just not as clean as it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I completely agree.
So in your book, you make an argument that I have flirted with a lot over the last 10 years, which is the solution to our divisions is federalism. And we have a bunch of Canadians in the audience, so this will... of course, federalism in the United States means the opposite of what it means in Canada. But I have flirted with this thesis for a long time that, let Vermont be Vermont, let Mississippi be Mississippi. But here's my concern about it, which is that to anybody who makes this argument who is not either a racist or tolerant of racism, and to be clear, you are neither, the argument for federalism has to be coupled with a very strong federal commitment to the Bill of Rights, which you also make clear in the book.
Right.
Now, the problem is that once you have a very strong federal commitment to the Bill of Rights, the contours of our current culture war reemerge in the form of what the meaning of the Bill of Rights is, right? And you get into these, is what's more important to you, religious liberty or gay rights? What are you? And then you get into interpretive questions regarding the definition and contours of the federal rights that we're going to protect, and how they interact with one another. And so my question is, how does your solution not recreate the problem that it is trying to correct?
Well, I think that...
And I say that with all sympathy to the idea.
So just to be clear about my definition of federalism, it does not, as you note, the brokenness of prior federalism, and this is, so you have to acknowledge the brokenness of prior federalism. And what prior federalism often in the United States has been, and under the guise of states' rights, was a federalism of the Bill of Rights. So that there were classes and categories of people in the United States who had fewer, and sometimes did not even enjoy at all the rights guaranteed by the Bill of Rights, depending on what state they lived in. So that form of federalism is fundamentally broken, because what it does is it denies people fundamental human rights. So what I say is we have to have vigorous national protection of the Bill of Rights and the Civil War amendments, and then we can have dramatic different approaches to healthcare policy, to climate policy, to the whole panoply of other policy engagements. And your critique is the single best critique of my proposal. And my answer to it is really unsatisfactory in this sense. What I'm arguing for is not no friction. I'm arguing for manageable friction. Friction between red and blue.
Okay, got it.
So I'm not arguing for no friction. What I'm arguing for is manageable friction. And that's when I think of pluralism. I refer to the pseudonymous writer Scott Alexander, I believe, called pluralism. It's not utopianism. It is not. It is. He called it sort of the best Civil War avoidance mechanism ever created by the mind of man. And so when I think of a robust pluralism in the United States, there's still friction. There's friction over the exact contours of the First Amendment. There's friction over the exact contours of the Second Amendment. The interaction between national non-discrimination statutes and freedom of association. There's friction there, and different factions will want to draw the lines in different places. But still the fundamental goal of sort of saying right now, with the size and power of the federal government, in many ways what we're saying is almost in every really truly substantive way that we want to adjust the terms and circumstances under which we live, we have to head federal for it. We have to head. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have variation in the states, but if you really want to do something big, you got to go federal. So I have this whole chapter in my book that basically says how single-payer health care in California could help save the republic. And not because I'm necessarily a supporter of single-payer health care, but because that would be such a big reform and require such a robust clawback of funds that the California sends to the federal government, that it would create a new environment for state governance. Because the fact of the matter is right now, so I'm in a very red state, super red district in a super red state and a super red precinct. I mean, it's just red, red, red. And I've never cast in my life a meaningful vote for president of the United States. I've either lived in very blue areas or very red areas. I don't think that I've cast a meaningful vote for the House in my entire adult life. That's a frustrating thing, because what it means is the governmental entities that have the most power over me, I functionally have no meaningful say.
Right.
But like, okay, so that's a great point. And a lot of people have pointed to that as like a reason that basic like for changing the fundamental voting structure, for example, of
Hmm.
like how we vote for president, because like it's not fair. It's like basically like you are just like in many ways like your vote means nothing
Yeah.
for federal for for federal office. But I guess I see what you mean by these big rights. And I do understand that like a baseline of them is extremely important. But then I look and like you're giving kind of these lists of like different types of issues that maybe like states could decide on their own. And I kind of look, I was actually just thinking about the drug legalization
Hmm.
movements that have happened in states. And I'm curious what you think of that, because I have watched that happen, and of course, obviously, that's not reflected in federal statute, and it's like purely like just a decision of enforcement that like the federal like look the other way. It's been happening for a while, especially around marijuana. Um, but there's a massive shift that's happened in the states of legalization of drugs, which makes a big difference in a lot of people's everyday lives. I mean, not like their right to vote, not their right to, privacy, not various other rights, but like, like a very, like a pretty significant day to day. I'm just curious, like, what you think of that and whether what that mechanism stands for, or if maybe that's an example of exactly a way that, like, it has gone correctly and that you'd
So,
agree with.
so that, in my view, that's the way it's gone
Oh,
correctly, and I agree with it. Well, I may not agree with all the contours of each state's policy, but I agree with the states having the ability to do this.
and would you
My,
agree with referendum voting, like on that? Like, so it's a
yeah,
referendum. Okay.
yeah. Now, what I don't like is I don't like how the federal government still has the sword of Damocles over your head.
Yeah.
So, marijuana decriminalization, say in Colorado, or if it happens in Tennessee, it's decriminalized under state law, but there's
Yeah.
still the federal sword, and you have to sort of trust that the DOJ will continue to sort of let it happen. And so that's a very good example, actually, of how federalism can adjust how we live in states in meaningful ways, and how the federal government has kind of let it happen,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to. And
Yeah.
and that's
And
my
it's like we could take
problem.
it back the second
I'll
we
give you
want to, if you've
I'll
gone
give you
too
a good
far.
Oh yeah, and so the power of sort of the executive branch of the federal government to sort of administration by administration either permit it or claw that power back is really, that's, to me, that's unacceptable. I would like to see the matter of criminalization of marijuana to be entirely a function of state law. Just
Now,
entirely. I think we have too many federal criminal statutes.
so I couldn't agree with that more, but I want to explore the contours of that. So one thing is total federal neutrality, i.e., no federal marijuana law, except I suppose the Food and Drug Act, to the extent that you're making a health claim for it, right?
Right.
A second is what we have now, which is, I think, the worst of all possible worlds, which is a federal ban that is not enforced in jurisdictions in which A, it is lawful under state law, and B, actors are complying with said state law, but as you say, could be. A third is to have a federal policy that affects only actions with a federal nexus. So,
Right.
in other words, totally legit in state A that permits marijuana to grow your own, to sell it, to do X, but don't put it in the mail, right? Don't take it on an airplane. Don't do anything. Don't cross an international frontier with it, even if it's legal in the place that you're going to. Is your argument for a real federal neutrality, or a federal, like, let the federal government have its say over things, over areas of a federal interest, but really let the states within their jurisdictions do their own thing?
I would say let the states within their jurisdictions do their own thing, and the federal interest wouldn't be. I would even say federal government get out of the crossing the state lines issue, because if Utah says no to marijuana and Colorado says yes to marijuana, Utah can enforce its own law once someone's in Utah. Now, I would say if you're on a military base the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and you have federal regulation of that military base. If you're in a national park, for example, again, these would be sort of narrow categories when you're actually on federal land under strictly federal jurisdiction. That doesn't impact a whole lot of us, especially outside of the military. And so I would be much more, I'm totally in favor of these states deciding this matter and leaving it to them, and the federal government not even, post office is a little bit different because those are federal employees.
Yeah, it's a weird line. Yeah.
It's a weird line. But to then say FedEx or UPS should comply with the same standards put on the USPS, I would say no. But yeah, so I would take a pretty, in my view, the federalism question here and drug legalization is exactly an area where I think we could have a lot of room for self-governance and a lot of room, and also it's going to be instrumental in dealing with mass incarceration.
Oh God, it's huge. It's huge. There's just so many people that are stupidly locked up for minor drug offenses, or for drug dealing, like non controlled substance. He's like, yeah.
And one other thing I would say about the Bill of Rights. So we just had a huge outpouring of anger and despair and rage this summer after the George Floyd killing. One of the problems we have with police brutality and police violence is we have had a way less than vigorous enforcement of the Bill of Rights.
Selective enforcement. Very
selective in American policing. Again, centered around the war on drugs primarily. And so one of my issues one of the things I talked about a ton this summer was, hey, if we want more social peace in this country, one of the elements of social peace is to invigorate the Bill of Rights in its totality. So conservatives long have said First and Second Amendments, yay. Fourth Amendment, unreasonable searches and seizures, not so.
Yeah, and I other than in The Onion, I don't see a lot of argument for a Third Amendment advocacy group.
Well, if there is a Third Amendment advocacy group, it's the most effective advocacy group.
No, that's the Onion article.
Yeah.
Third Amendment advocacy group celebrates 150 years of success or something like that.
Yeah, but I would like to see people being equally committed to all of the operative amendments in the Bill of Rights.
Alice, not Eve, has two other case studies for your for application of Frenchian federalism.
So the two cases I was most interested in, because while like Ben, I find your theory very lame. I feel like, and again, as Ben mentioned, it's sometimes it's the argument over what exactly is a human right that really divides conservatives and liberals. So I chose two issues where I feel like both people are arguing in the form of essential rights, and they are abortion and transgender issues. And I was wondering if you can address those.
Losing that. I lost a lot of that question, Ben. Can you summarize?
Yeah, so...
sorry, Alice, your audio is bad.
She said she asks for application to of Frenchism to the issues of abortion and transgender rights as case studies. Sure. So what does Frenchian federalism look like in that context?
Well, I think I'm going to go back and agree with Ruth Bader Ginsburg circa 1992. Okay. And Ginsburg in 1992 said something very interesting about Roe. She said it'd be very interesting it would be interesting to know if we would have fewer national disputes about abortion if the Roe decision was less what she said breathtaking in scope. So rather than deciding Roe on narrow grounds, the court decided it on big sweeping grounds. And so what that did is it immediately nationalized the entire issue from now until for an indefinite future period. There are two things going on here. One, I think that I believe that this should be a matter left to the states. But there's also something really interesting happening in the context of abortion, that the facts on the ground are beginning to overtake, and a lot of people don't realize this. The facts on the ground are beginning to overtake the political debate. So right now, the abortion rate in the United States of America is much lower than it was when Roe was decided. Abortion is both in rate and ratio. Rate is per 1,000 women. Ratio is per 1,000 pregnancies. The abortion rate and ratio is just going through the floor. And without really substantial legal changes. So one of the interesting questions that I have is this a practice that, if you fast forward with the same trends that have been happening for the last 20 years, if you fast forward another 5 years, if you fast forward another 10 years, are we talking about something that salience in American society is decreasing? Because it's really interesting. If you look at it, the abortion rate has declined under every president since Reagan. Every one. Didn't matter if they were pro-life or if they were pro-choice. It declined under every one. So now on the second question
but wait, how does that relate to birth rate? So is this just a matter of birth control, or is this a matter of like people having more babies?
So people on a general rule are having fewer babies.
Right. So it's birth control.
It's super complicated.
Right,
so
okay.
it's if it was only abortion rate, okay, which would be abortions per 1,000 women.
Okay.
Then you would say that's contraception.
Okay, this is what you blipped out for a second when you said, was this your comparison with rate and ratio?
Right, exactly.
Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. So it's both rate and ratio have gone down.
Got it. Okay. Sorry about that. I just missed what you said.
Yeah, no worries. And then on the gender identity issue, I think constitutionally, Title VII is a constitutional American statute. I don't think that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is unconstitutional. I don't think, nor should I think it be ruled unconstitutional. I think, but what I do think under sort of my framework, what's interesting is that the Supreme Court has backed its way into what looks a lot more like a legislative compromise on these issues, but I think it's an actual workable compromise. And what it has essentially done is it said there's a secular sacred distinction. So if you're in a secular workplace, and like I want to work for an insurance agency and I'm LGBT, and if somebody's a religious person who runs the insurance agency, but it's not a religious insurance agency, to say, well, because I have objections to X, Y, or Z, you can't work here. There is a much greater state interest than in saying if somebody wants to work for a religious ministry that has a specific, coherent, orthodox statement of beliefs. And so what you've seen, and the interesting, fascinating thing about this is the people who have really carved this out are Breyer, Kagan, Roberts, Gorsuch. So if you look at the sort of alignment of cases from Masterpiece Cake Shop, which was 7-2, to the 6-3 Bostic decision, to the most recent ministerial exemption case, which was 7-2, you really see how there's a kind of a cross ideological alignment that has put that kind of compromise together. And I think it's workable. It doesn't meet everyone's demands, but I think it's workable.
Well, in lieu of a Congress that actually can come up with that compromise. I mean, it's
any compromise with Congress, any compromise. Yeah.
Yeah. Ben, do you want to go?
Let's bring in Tony Cava. The floor is yours, sir.
Hi there. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Yep. I can't hear David.
Oh.
So, David, can you hear me?
I can. Mm-hmm.
You can't hear David at all?
I can't hear David at all, and I might be the only one.
Well, we've been hearing a lot that people can only hear David on the left track of their phone, of their ear. David, can you fiddle with make sure your mic is fully plugged in?
Yeah, it's
I did have that before where I thought maybe David was coming in stereo.
huh.
No,
But
you
if
seem
David,
to be
Odd.
you're only coming in on my left ear. And well, anyway, Tony,
Yeah.
ask your question, and we will keep working on David's
Yeah.
audio while we
Yeah.
chat, and eventually
Okay.
you'll be able to hear him.
Yeah, great. David, a pleasure. Thanks for coming on. I was going to ask you about that. I just sometimes I need to reread my question, and that is that earlier this year you wrote pretty eloquently regarding punishing Trump but re-electing a Republican Senate to counteract the resulting Biden presidency. Do you find that this position is still tenable, given GOP support of Trump's attempted legal coup, as well as the role that the GOP Senate and Congress has played aiding and abetting Trump's failed pandemic response? If that's still tenable, is there anything ours could do or would do that would lead you to withdraw your call for a Republican Senate to counterbalance Biden?
Yeah, I mean, boy, they're taxing me. These Republicans. Look, I mean, I'll be honest with you. Every one of the 126 members of the House who signed that letter, I think, should be voted out of office. I mean, that who signed on to that amicus brief should be voted out of office. But you know what? They're in the safest of safe red districts, and
Right.
me saying that is like me calling for Justice Barrett to sanction Ken Paxton. I mean, I want what I can't have. Look, I mean, what Kelly Loeffler has done, not just in calling for the resignation of the Secretary of State of Georgia, but campaigning and campaigning with Marjorie Taylor Greene, the QAnon supporting conspiracy theorist, it's repugnant. It's repugnant. So I've always said we should make individual determinations on politicians, that rather than saying if they've got the R by the name or the D by the name. And my individual determination for politician is, look, you have to two-part test for me. You have to have a character that's commensurate with the office that you seek, and you have to broadly agree with me on political policy. You have to meet both tests. And look, what I'm seeing out of these Georgia Senate candidates it's terrible. I mean, it's terrible. And now I know they would defend by saying, look, I mean, I'm caught between a rock and a hard place. If I don't jump on to this, if I don't at least give some sort of tacit agreement with what's going on. But you don't have to call for the resignation of Secretary of State. You don't have to.
And you don't have to tolerate the threats to the life of his staff.
You don't have to be silent when people are threatening their lives. I mean, how can I look at that and say you're meeting test number 1 about character, and that's so.
But it seems to me that you need a methodology, as at times have I, for what do you do when one group of people fails your test of basically agreeing with me on policy, including in your case some very deep-seated convictions that half the country or more than half the country disagrees with, and the other half of the candidates fail your basic character test. What's the ordering? So Reagan had a solution to this, right? Which is you always vote for the most conservative person who has a chance of getting elected. All right, that's not going to work for you anymore. Like,
No.
what's the
You come up with a new test.
yeah? Well, what's the methodological solution when one side consistently fails one part of your test and the other side consistently fails the other side part of your test?
Well, that's a really great question, and I get asked this all the time. And how I've answered that is, I draw a lot of inspiration actually from thoughtful libertarians, okay, who have long had not felt like they belong to either tribe, but they'll say, you know what, if you agree with me on X, I will work with you on X. If you agree with me on Y, I will work with you on Y. But I'm a free agent when it comes to voting. I'm unaffiliated when it comes to voting. But when it comes issue to issue, like if we're going to talk about federalism and drug policy, I'm with you. If we're going to talk about dealing with mass incarceration, I'm with you. If you're going to talk about revitalizing the Fourth Amendment and unreasonable search, prohibition against unreasonable search and seizure by ending no-knock raids, I'm with you. But I may not be be on Team Blue or may not be on Team Red, and I think that that's actually a viable way of walking day to day through your political life, is to say, okay, these are the issues that I care about. I'm on the issues. I'm on those issues. And I've actually written a lot of things, especially encouraging Christians, evangelical Christians, to take that approach, because as the GOP becomes more corrupt down to its marrow, what we're seeing now is the corruption of the soul of a party. As it becomes more corrupt down to its marrow, if you're saying I'm a Republican, there's this concept that a pastor named Tim Keller articulated that got a lot of people mad when he said it. But what you're doing is you're signing on to package deal ethics. So you're signing on not only to the ethics of the issue that draws you to the party, but you're also signing on to the ethics of the party. And you may not like that bargain. And so, what I'm saying is, don't do the package deal ethics thing, especially if you're going to make an argument that you have some sort of higher moral calling into the culture. And so that's how I sort of take this, I approach this as, hey, look, I mean, we got to, I'm not all in, if somebody is my 70% friend, I'm not going to, the way we look at things now, they're my 100% enemy because they're not with me 100%. But the way I'm going to look at it, if somebody's my 70% friend, they're my 70% friend. Mm-hmm. And we can work together in a bunch and actually be real friends.
The only thing that I'd kind of add is, like, to your point, which is really on point, that what did you say his name is? Tim Keller, the pastor? Mm-hmm. Yeah. You said that Keller said about the package, like the bundle of that like a party presents. Well, it's just like a form of tribalism and a form of kind of big tenting, or like whatever you want to call it. And to a certain extent, like, certainly religious groups do that, like, and any type of like, and local, and I mean, it doesn't have to be religious groups. It could be any type of special interest groups. And you'll go to, I imagine that if you were kind of advocating for for legal marijuana or decriminalizing marijuana in Massachusetts, that people might have an overlap, that you might develop friend groups and like kind of understandings that end up like advocating for, decriminalization of marijuana and like reforming the criminal justice system. And then like you kind of get a whole, like, everything becomes like a whole bunch of issues. I think that in any situation, you should be an independent thinker and kind of make your decisions. I mean, basically what you're arguing for is people thinking through individual issues on the merits themselves and not based on kind of like being a member of like, oh my God. Don't be too much of an independent thinker.
Yeah, I think the Room Raider just got its revenge. The baby cannon, the battle axe, and the pineapple all came crashing down.
Does your office smell like pineapple right now?
No.
Oh,
I think the pineapple kind of bounced.
Okay. But at least the battle axe didn't like dislodge or something and go flying
or like
across
land
the
on
room.
A dog down there or something.
Yeah, seriously.
No, I think we're okay here.
But I have a very specific question I'm going to read because we've asked her to come in, but she hasn't turned down the or is not responding, so we will just ask it. Can the Senate filibuster the counting of the votes on January 6th? I don't actually know the answer to that question. Do you know, David?
Well, not if they're complying with the relevant statutes. So the way the relevant statutes work is that there is a process by which the vote of the Electoral College is presented. And objections can be raised, but the objection has to come from a senator and a representative from the state. So, if, for example, the guy who's leading, you basically have to have a senator and a representative from the state. Now, the objection is supposed to be raised in writing, but if the electors have been chosen by the safe harbor deadline, the objection is not going to be valid. Okay, so that was the importance of the safe harbor deadline. But what you'll probably see and I wish, can I pull up the actual statute? What you'll probably see is that you will see, here's this, here is, oh, well, what you'll probably see is the relevant statute says that if the electors have been lawfully certified, lawfully selected by the safe harbor deadline, then you're going to have, then it's presumptively valid. And so what you might end up having is some of these people saying that, oh, because Pennsylvania did X or Y or Z, their slate was not lawfully certified by the safe harbor deadline. But they will have no legal basis for saying that. There won't be any legal determination that says that. All of the legal determinations that will have happened by the, by the 6th of January will be that they were lawfully certified. But watch for that. That if the Supreme Court rejects, well, when the Supreme Court rejects this Texas ruling, what you'll then have is it will go to the Senate and the House, and there will probably be, if they can get a senator or two to join with them, there will probably be an objection. But if the safe harbor deadline has been complied with, it says, if you've been lawfully certified according to Section 6 of this title, from which but one return has been received, shall be rejected. That you can't be rejected. You can't be rejected.
All right. Yes. So we've got 3 questions lined up. We've got 8 minutes. Let's get through them.
God, that went so fast. Sorry.
Yeah, it sure did. David,
you're almost beheading yourself.
The floor is yours, and there's a delay, so we can hear you but can't see you. You'll pop up momentarily.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. Given the destruction of norms over the last 4 years, and recognizing that the influence of Mr. Trump will not disappear like a miracle on January 20th. What are your thoughts? Oh, Ben, I've got you over here, Ben.
Oh, wait, let's take a look at. Oh, nice. We got the axe and the pineapple. And what do we have going on the other side?
That's I had posted a free.
Oh, those are like oil lamps.
No, it's a picture that it's a picture of doorknobs. Someone
round doorknobs. Yeah.
Someone posted on Craigslist. Anyways, whatever. Yes, that is it's a joke I thought was hilarious. No one else on Twitter did. Hi, David. Sorry, go ahead with your question.
Mr. French, what are your thoughts on 2-part? 1, how has the media changed in response to norm destructions? And then 2, how should it change moving forward, given that we're going to live with the echoes of 45 for a long time?
Ooh, okay. So let me just give you my theory real fast. Conservative media is due for an epic civil war after this, because there's been a frontal attack launched on Fox News. I don't know if you saw that Martha McCallum lost in the 25 to 44 demographic, or 25 to 54, whatever that key demographic is, to Newsmax for the first time last week. And so there's an epic war between Fox and OAN and Newsmax that's brewing. There is still the talk radio world. Conservative media right now is there, and look, there are some outstanding high integrity journalists, analysts, pundits, but as a whole the institution is fundamentally broken. It's just fundamentally broken. It is they have helped create a populist rage monster, and anyone who departs from that rage monster or dissents from that rage monster suffers almost immediately. And so there's going to be a real battle as to what is conservative media going to be and at post-Trump. And then there's going to be a big battle over who sort of, does somebody inherit the mantle from Trump? Or do people continue to genuflect to Trump? Because there's a lot of ambitious populist politicians that they don't want to be in Trump's shadow forever. You know, that there's going to be, some of these folks are going to want to break out from his shadow But it's very risky to do so. So there's going to be a lot of people who are testing the water, looking, holding their finger in the air to see if Trump recedes. And I think a lot of them are banking on that when Trump is tweeting and angry and all of that without the power of the presidency, he's going to recede sort of naturally without anyone actually doing anything to him. But for years, people have been making the mistake of believing he's going to recede naturally without anyone doing anything to him. So I think, conservative media and the broader conservative movement is in for an absolutely just vicious internecine fight.
But what about okay, I know we have to end quickly, but what about just to this end, if there are these two new radical networks emerging, I feel like Wall Street Journal has fallen somewhere into the centrist camp. People don't even think of it as conservative anymore. Is there a chance that Fox might go back to kind of becoming, dare I say it, a conservative bent centrist news channel, and
it's not where the revs are?
But it's not. But if it has to just give up the revs because the revs leave, because Trump won't come on and talk on Fox and Friends and whatever else, and he does it in the new network, whichever one it is, or if it's both of them, then maybe they have a totally different audience.
There's a chance. I do think there's a chance. I don't think that Fox is going to try to out Newsmax.
Right.
I don't think it's
going to lose.
Yeah. So I do think there's a chance that Fox could zig where they zag and sort of see if Newsmax will kind of collapse under the weight of its own insanity. So I do think that there is a chance there. But again, a lot of this is just completely up for grab because the big wild card is nobody really knows how much purchase a post-presidency Trump is going to have. That's the thing. And a lot of people who sort of make their decisions based on him are in suspended animation, while those of us who've decided what we think about him a long time ago are forging on and saying what we think. There's an awful lot of just total uncertainty over how much purchase he's still going to have. And so that's leaving a lot of people not quite knowing what this next 6, 8, 9 months, 12 months is going to look like.
Christopher Argyris, up late in London.
All right, David.
Question.
I know that you are not normally a big D Democratic strategist and aren't in the habit of giving advice to Pelosi. But should Pelosi and the House Democrats refuse to seat the 126 representatives who signed on to support the Texas lawsuit, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment bars from government those who, quote, have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the U.S. or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof.
I say no because somebody's got to stop all these escalations. We're this close to violence, y'all. We're this close to violence. I'm very worried about it. And
really,
and I think a move along those lines. I mean, I think we may have it anyway. But a move along those lines, refusing to seat them. These are not. Yeah. I think that would be an unwise decision.
I agree with that for a different reason, which is that if you're trying to stand up for the principle of respecting elections, failing to respect elections, probably not the best way to do that. Though I do think I would love to see, say, Republicans for the Rule of Law take out ads in every single one of their districts. I think a certain amount of public shaming of them is appropriate. I'm not sure institutional retaliation by the House of Representatives is the way to do that. Jack Sullivan, you get the last question today while I post Alice's awesome idea for a poll.
So I'm wondering how you would identify the essential characteristics that cause some conservatives to be and to stay Miller Trumpers, as opposed to those who seem to support Trump. So, for example, they get concerned with authoritarianism, or what is the thing that is the dividing factor?
Thank you, Jack. I'm just going to restate your question because your audio is going in and out a little. So his question was, what is the essential characteristic that caused some conservatives to be and stay never Trumpers as opposed to those who came to support Trump. And then I think, Jack, if I heard you correctly, you said that like you gave an example of like authoritarianism as like maybe or like love of or like liking, like not being afraid of authoritarianism as like maybe like an example of one of those characteristics. So what are your thoughts, David?
Whew, that's a heavy question
I know.
to answer quickly. Let me back up and sort of make a more sort of a philosophical statement about human nature. And that is, I don't think we really know who we are and what our principles really are and what really defines us until it's tested. And so I think there are a lot of people who responded to Trump out of fear, that they began to believe the rhetoric that America would be over if Hillary won or if Joe Biden won. I think there's a lot of people who, when push came to shove over like their traditional, all of the things that Trump did that they would have absolutely condemned all day long in a Democrat, that they were ambitious, they were perhaps greedy. But what I saw in a lot of people was that fear amongst people who had sort of goodwill, that a lot of them, they were overcome by fear. They were just overcome by fear. And I think a lot of the Never Trump folks that I know, we read the Flight 93 election essay and just thought it was kind of nuts, like just kind of nuts. And besides, as a Christian, I don't believe that my values are tactics. Like you can't look at your values as tactics to sort of say that
you can. They're just not values. And as soon as you
they're not values anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're commanded to bless those who persecute you, to love your enemies, to demonstrate kindness as part of the fruits of the Spirit, there's not an asterisk that says until it stops working. That you just do it. You just do it. And when a movement begins to define itself by being contrary to those values, you can't be a part of it. The choice on joining that movement or not joining the movement is made by the choice of values that underlie your life. And you sometimes don't really learn what those values are until they're put under test.
What a great point.
We are going to leave it there. David French, when you secede from the Union,
I'll come with you.
We will we will come with you so that your new country is as divided as the one that you left, although we'll be nicer about it.
We'll call it New Delaware. No one likes Delaware.
New Delaware. I love it.
Yeah, Camden, as New Delaware is known.
Yeah, exactly. Just like leave all the corporations there in Delaware, and then like we can make a new one for actual people.
David French, you're a great American. We will talk again soon. Tomorrow it's a Just Us day, Kate. So we're not going to have a scramble for a guest. We're going to plan the show and shoot the shit. Maybe by then the Supreme Court will have tossed out this very silly piece of nonsense from Texas. And
I'm going to throw out a teaser for my mystery guest, so you can try to guess it. You're not going to be able to guess it, but it's a riddle. And like part of the riddle is that it has already been on the show today, in part, been on the show today. Dun dun dun.
All right.
Okay.
Well, we're going to work on that. And of course, I will have to reset up the Bob Mueller puppet holding the battle axe and embedding it in the pineapple for the benefit of Room Raider.
Didn't you say you were good at epoxy? Can you just like stick it on the wall with some epoxy?
I can do it any of a number of ways, including putting a spike up through the shelf.
I'm shot. Okay.
And it's gonna stay, but I just wanted you all to see it right away. So all of that will begin 22 hours and 55 minutes from now as we enter episode 261, days in a row of In Lieu of Fun. And until then, we don't have fun anymore. And if we're not careful, we're not only going to have not fun, we're going to have violence and sectarian strife and worse regional tensions.
And you're going to be asking Ben to borrow that battle axe.
Yeah, so just chill out, people, and tolerate each other. be nice, and even when you can't like agree with somebody or respect their views, try to be kind anyway. We'll see you soon.
Great.
Thank you, David.
Bye,
Thank
David.
you all
So
very
lovely
much.
seeing you as always.
Oh, thank you all.